Let's go to Todd Graham. He's the director of debate at Southern Illinois University. He's been named the National Debate Coach of the Year 3 times. Thanks for your time tonight.
Absolutely.
Would you have called what happened last time a debate?
Well, yes. In fact, I called it the worst debate in presidential debating history.
What
So
stood
I
out
had to
for
put
you,
the
Todd?
word in there. But no, it's not a good debate. No, it was just chaotic. So that's why it was the worst debate. I would hope for something better, but I'm not sure if we'll see anything better tonight.
Okay, so let me ask you, last time there were insults hurled back and forth. There was a lot of interruption. We're going to have the mute button in play. How much do you think that mute button will help to gain control of the action?
The mute button, unfortunately, is not on President Trump. It is on the microphone. And so that makes a difference. If President Trump chooses to be Mr. Hyde instead of Dr. Jekyll, then there's no stopping him. So what I think the mute button might do is it might get Trump to have pent-up anger, right? So for each topic, there's 11 minutes of open discussion after the 4 minutes of closed microphones. So what's going to happen in that 11 minutes might be that Trump gets even more frustrated because he wasn't allowed to interrupt Joe Biden, and then he gets even worse in the 11 minutes of open discussion. So that's only one of the problems. Another problem is because Donald Trump might not like what Joe Biden is saying, he might interrupt him even without the microphone on. And if you've run a public debate like I do, you know that that'll still disrupt the speaker, even though they can't hear or we can't hear at home what the question is. So I'm not sure that the microphone trick is going to do much good.
So that 11 minutes, as you mentioned, could, yes, have Donald Trump sort of burst back on the scene if he's been muted for a while, but it could also cause Joe Biden to lose his way a little bit, and we know people are worried about that.
Yes, one of the things that Joe Biden had trouble with in the Democratic primaries, and I criticized him pretty heavily, was he would lose his train of thought when he would speak for a long time. But it's frankly because he was trying to think of too many things at once. And so if he can just try to simplify his answers, he won't lose his train of thought. But again, if Donald Trump's interrupting him, it's hard, it's hard if you're being interrupted to keep going on one single idea. I think the best debate to look at Joe Biden was how he did against Bernie Sanders. That was a one-on-one debate. They were civil, and he was excellent in that debate. So that would be the one to look at.
Okay, so if you were looking at strengths, and we will look at the first presidential debate as one example, but if you were to look at the careers of both of these men, what would be the strength that each brings to that debating scene tonight?
I think that's pretty easy. Joe Biden brings empathy. Right. He brings that sort of he feels like us. He seems like us. We can definitely see us in Joe Biden. And so he's very good at talking to people, at looking at the camera and talking to the American public. What Donald Trump was historically better at was in the primaries he had 4 years ago. He was funny. Donald Trump he can be right. You see him at his rallies, but it's not just his rallies. He can be quite quick-witted when he wants to be. And so he can be funny when needed. He just has to tone down on the temperament in doing so.
All right, then let's flip to the other side. What are the weaknesses you see for each of the candidates?
I think Trump's is just falsehoods, right? Trump has been recorded in human history as the biggest liar we've ever seen, mostly because people aren't recording me every day, I suppose. But because he's being recorded, and people can tell that he's just not being honest in these debates. So he needs to do two things: interrupt less and be more honest, at least tone down the hyperbole. That would go a long way toward getting voters to want to go vote for him. As for Joe Biden, he just needs to keep saying why he should be elected president. People always need a takeaway. And 4 years ago, I talked to people that even thought Hillary did well in the debates, but they said Hillary Clinton. There was no takeaway from those debates. Why would I vote for her? So Biden needs to go strong on one or two arguments and have a solid reason to vote for him, not just against Trump.
So, Todd, sometimes when you're watching these debates, and because you've watched and participated, I'm sure, in so many of them, there's a sign or a signal that things are about to get out of control. We saw it last time, and I want to know what you're watching for this time that would signal to you this is not going well.
One of the keys is can the moderator keep control? And so we saw Chris Wallace not just lost control, but he had to raise his voice. And at one point he said, "Oh, just talk about whatever you want," basically. And so that's a sign that the debate's out of control. The second sign is if Joe Biden consistently interrupts Donald Trump, because while Biden does interrupt some, he can be moderated to do that less. But if he's going back and forth, then you know the debate's lost, because Trump will not be outdone in any form of interruption or loud talking or anything like that.
But doesn't it seem inevitable that the moderator will have to raise their voice and will have to sort of maybe even use the mute button when they're not supposed to be using the mute button because of the character of Donald Trump?
It's a fine question, but my answer to that is no. It is yes, unfortunately, for tonight. It would be no if the Commission on Presidential Debates had debate experts like myself helping them out along the way, because we've learned how to deal with rowdy debaters, with roughshod debaters, with people who don't tell truths. And so we've trained our moderators better in different forms of debate that we do. Unfortunately, the Commission has told these moderators to stay out of it, to let them go at each other. And that's the wrong approach. You need a much more heavy hand. So I do believe you're right that it will be difficult to control Donald Trump, but inevitably, that's not what had to be. You start control by talking to them before the debate, and there are a lot of techniques that we've used personally. I've seen people worse than Donald Trump, trust me, before, and we've managed to get control of them. So it is possible. I just don't think so tonight.
Can you give me an idea of how you managed to do that?
Yeah, there are different techniques for stopping people to interrupt. So I would talk to them before the debate, and I would say, listen, when you interrupt, here's what happens, because Trump hasn't been told the truth. So I would tell him that the polls actually said independents couldn't stand you in that last debate. I would be the moderator, and I would tell him that. So the more you interrupt, the more votes you lose. I think that would get to him a little bit, and he would realize that that's something he wants to do. And the other thing you could do is explain to them how not to interrupt. If you look at the camera, if you look at the audience, if you look at the moderator, if you look at your own paper, people tend to interrupt less than if you look at each other. But staring at each other will only cause trouble. And so that's one of the tips I give before the debate. I calm them down. I give them tips for what to do and how to avoid it. And then we start from there.
Very interesting. All right. Maybe Donald Trump listening right now and getting that advice straight from you, Todd Graham. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you being on the program.
Absolutely.